Hello, welcome back to my build of this Barnstormer 25S. So this time I'm going to be putting on the aileron control linkages, and you can see them on the plan. Here's the aileron right here. Here's the trailing edge, and then the linkages go in between the trailing edge and this little piece of plywood kind of bracing, I guess. So this is a kind of a small step, but it's actually going to take a little bit of thought. So what I need to do is I want to make sure, or at least try to make sure that the axis of the aileron rod or linkage, whatever you want to call this thing, is kind of lined up with the hinge. So here I drew kind of a picture of that. So here's going to be the aileron linkage, and then here's the hinge. So I want the center of the aileron linkage to be lined up with the hinge line. Now, if that doesn't happen, then they'll be kind of rotating along a different line, and then that'll create a little bit of sort of like differential sort of stress between the hinge and then kind of the movement coming off of the aileron. So this guy's going to sit on here, kind of in here like this, right? And it's going to move like that. And then this kind of support piece of plywood is going to go on top of it like that. And that kind of holds it in place. So what I have to do in order to make this work out right is I have to put a groove in the leading edge. Of course, notch this out back in here so there's room for the rod to move back and forth. And then I also have to put somewhat of a little bit of a groove in this brace, because I want the as I said before, I want the axis or the line, the hinge line, to be lined up. So I can't sink this too far down, and obviously I can't go too far up because I don't have very much room to work with in this plywood piece. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line, like a center line, so I have a guide. So this leading edge, or trailing edge, I'm sorry, is about 3/8 of an inch wide, which means the center is about 3/16. So I'm going to go ahead and mark a 3/16 in and draw a horizontal line, or draw a line down the center, and that'll be my guide. Okay, so I have the center line marked, and looks like it's pretty good. So the next step is I'm going to measure off from the plans. I'm going to measure the distance right here from the center to where the control horn is, right here, where the connection is, and that's going to be my starting point for the placement of the linkage. Okay, well, based on the plans, it's a little bit over 3/8 of an inch from the center. There. About there. And now I can just use the control rod to give me the approximate distance to the edge, or to the end, I should say, right about there. Right about there. Okay, so those are our marks. This will come all the way over here, obviously. So that's going to be the guide, kind of like the marking guides to cut this stuff out. Right, so what I want to do is I want to make sure, if you can see this or not, I want to make sure that I'm pretty much halfway down with the aileron linkage rod. And if it's halfway down inside here, then I know that I'm kind of roughly, my center line is going to be roughly the same as the center line of the hinges. So I'm, you know, it's not, again, it's not perfect, but I think I got it close. All right, so these are, looks like they're about right. So now all I have to do is get this plywood piece to fit over that, and it's going to kind of sandwich this in here. So the only place that they actually get glued on is right here on this sleeve. So this is going to be epoxied, and then this is going to be sandwiched on top of that, and then it can be epoxied around the edges. But I have to be careful because I don't want to obviously glue this thing in place. It's got to be able to move. So we'll be careful about that. So next I got to go ahead and put a groove in this so that it can accommodate the upper part of these aileron linkages. All right, so just like on the leading edge where I marked, I'm going to go ahead and mark the center line on this plywood kind of brace. All right, so now I have this piece marked. Okay, so yeah, this took a lot more than I thought it would in terms of getting the wood out and getting it to fit right. These look like they're very kind of relatively thin, but they do take up some space. But I did get it, I think, right. So this one's going to go like this. This one will go right here. And then I had to cut a couple notches in here because when the aileron linkages swing out and kind of away from the leading edge, they have to have room. They have to have room to move. So these are going to go on here like this. Yeah, so it's going to look like that right there. Hopefully you can see that. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to epoxy the sleeve in. I'm going to do that without this on it. So I'm going to do this separately. So I'll epoxy these sleeves on here, and then just to make sure that it, at least on this side, it's not that I don't glue it onto the wood. And I'll carefully glue this one on, and then we'll put the I'm going to put some fiberglass reinforcement around it because this has gotten pretty thin, and this is the only thing that's holding the aileron linkages on. So I got to make sure that this is strong enough. I think it's going to be okay. Just got to make sure we take some precautions with it. So I'm going to use 5-minute epoxy because I don't really need the working time, and as I do with 30-minute epoxy. And even though the 30-minute epoxy may kind of soak in better and make a little bit better bond in the long run, in this particular application I don't think it's going to matter too much. Plus I am going to put the additional fiberglass around the outside when I finish to help strengthen it a little bit further. I know some people believe that fiberglass doesn't add that much strength. I agree somewhat, but it does add some strength. And I just need to be super careful that I don't get this thing gummed up. And that's one of the reasons why I want to do the 5-minute epoxy, because I want it to set quicker and I can kind of monitor it as it sets up. So if it starts to gum up or something, I can move it and do that kind of thing. I don't want to do that for 30 minutes with the other stuff. So this guy's going to go right here. I can move it around a little bit, but right now I'll just leave it right here. I'll let it sit there like that. Just gonna go on the edge. Okay, like that. Ah, boy. That kind of makes me worried. Well, this looks a little bit like Dr. Frankenstein worked on it, but I think it's going to be okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let this cure up, and then come back and do some sanding on this. And then, like as I said, I'm probably going to put a strip of fiberglass just around this in a few places to give it a little bit extra strength. Okay, so we're back. I set this out overnight, or let it sit overnight. Now, being a 5-minute epoxy, I could have worked on it earlier, but I just didn't have time. So let's pull this off of here, take a look at it. Okay. All right, so it came out okay. All right, so now I'm just going to go ahead and sand this and get it to sort of sand it up and clean it up. And then I'm going to apply a fiberglass cloth with the resin again, just to help support it. It's actually pretty strong. I don't think it's going to be a problem, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, so I sanded this down and got it all kind of smoothed out, and I cut a piece of fiberglass cloth, and this is going to go right over here, and it's going to go a little bit about right there, and it's just going to go around it like this, and I'm going to fiberglass it on. I'm going to put it on with the resin. Okay, so I got this little fiberglassing job pretty much done. I'll continue to work with it a little bit as it cures up, as it starts to set, just to make sure that the fiberglass is staying down, and make sure that's in contact, and I got all the little bubbles and everything out of it. It's nice having these rubber gloves. I suggest using rubber gloves because you can do kind of like finger painting. You can do a lot of adjustments and getting it right, even kind of working the resin into the fiberglass. It's kind of a good way to do it. All right, so I let this sit again for a while overnight, and now it's all cured up, and you can see the fiberglass cloth is all finished curing. And if I can show a couple pictures here. Oh, yeah, you kind of see how it's. So now we got to just go back now and kind of sand these areas and kind of smooth it out again. I got to clean up some of the fiberglass right in here. All right, so here's the finished aileron linkages, and I sanded this all nice and smooth and made sure that it could blend with the other fiberglassing that was done before. I cut enough room so that I have plenty of throw and free movement to work with when I go to make the adjustments and install the servos and install the ailerons on top of here. All right, so now that the ailerons are finished, that was the last step for the wing construction before moving on to covering the wing with Monokote. So I think the wing came out okay. There's a few little tricky spots. This was probably the most tricky, or the trickiest, I guess. And then of course I made that mistake earlier where I had I put the aileron servo opening on the wrong side of the wing. But I just simply patched that, and it's not going to affect anything. So here's the basically where the servo is going to be mounted for the ailerons. And I think now the next move on this build is going to be to start doing the covering with Monokote. And until then, thanks for watching. I appreciate you watching, and please subscribe, and we'll see you next time.